got it going. With the spin of the wheel, we'll uncover our fate and stream it to you on one take. We tend to be loud and we fight quite a bit, but it's an unscripted show, so you get what you get. If we stop to right now and we just walked away, we'd be back here next week, cause we just can't wait to play.
Hello, everyone. We've teleported in. Welcome to another edition of ARG Presents. I'm your good buddy, your good pal, Amigo Aaron. And I'm joined by a man this week who's known as the Universal Jerkbag. Please give it up for the Brent.
At least in Universal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better than worldwide.
Yeah, I suppose so. And speaking of Universal,
Oh, that's your segue?
that's it. We spun the
Ooh.
wheel. We made the deal last week, Brent,
Yes.
in a special double up of ARG Presents. And this week, we'll be looking at the arcade games of Universal Entertainment.
Yes.
This is a company that really is, it's funny, when we looked into them, I thought they were more expansive in their library than they really were. They had some games.
It's fair.
But I mean, really, if you look at Universal's lineup, there are 2 or 3 big highlights, and then one ultra bomb that took care. That really they rode the coattails of. I mean, bomb in a good way this time. And so we're gonna talk about it. Did you know much? Like when I say Universal Entertainment,
Yeah.
What do you think of arcade was? What's the first thing that
Mr.
pops into your mind? Sure.
Yeah.
Sure it is, because that's the King Dong.
Well, it is, but it's also their mascot for
Yeah.
all intents and purposes. They had big hits before that,
Sure.
but that was certainly something you could hang your hat on.
You know, the funny thing about Universal is, so you're right. I think of Mr. Do myself every time. But Universal's library stretches back to the late 70s.
Yeah.
And including a few games from that era that were very popular. And they had some games that would surprise you. I mean, if I'm honest. So,
They were very varied.
yeah, they sure were. And
Although the beginning of their lifespan was a whole lot of yoinky takey.
yeah, and the funny thing is they're still around, which is weird. So these guys were found.
Well,
Yeah, they are,
I mean, sort
but not in the arcade
Yeah.
area. These guys were found in Japan on December 2nd, 1969. So way back, and early on, of course, you're right. This was sort of a distributing company early on. And they didn't really get into, like I said, they didn't really get in the arcade portion of their business until '77 with a game, their first offering called Scratch, which was a straight up Breakout clone. But guess what? Why not rip off the people that ripped other people off? That's what I say. And this I'd never heard, but Scratch. That was the 3rd highest earning arcade game in Japan of 1977. Now, granted, it's not like there were a million games out, but there were some games.
Yeah.
And this game, this Breakout clone, was 3rd. So they were out of the gate hot. You know.
That's the kind of beginning that makes you go, oh, okay, there's some money in this.
Yeah, and if you look at their early offerings, it's like, let's see, someone at Universal went to the arcade and was like, let's see, we got Breakout, Space Invaders.
Yeah,
Okay,
they were very yoinky grabby.
let's rip off these things. Oh, card game, let's rip that off.
Yeah.
And so their early games, in true Coco fashion, were basically cloned.
And really, clone might be overstating how yoinky grabby they were.
Yeah, for example, Cosmic Monsters in '78 was a Space Invaders clone, and it became the 6th highest earning arcade game that same year, '78. So far, they're 2 for 2, both of which they ripped off to another company.
Yep.
So you can't keep your business going that way. And so they eventually they had to branch. Well, I mean, you shouldn't. And so they decided they ended up making their own sort of they made their own games that were less cloney, I guess. We're going to talk about one of their biggest games later on in the show. So I'm going to kind of skip over that one. But one of their huge hits, and this is probably another game that's synonymous with Universal, was Ladybug.
Yes.
1981's Ladybug, which
First
was a
female protagonist in a video game. If you look
really
at it that way. Yep.
Ladybug, a popular game. It was a popular console cartridge.
Mhm.
I remember it was a real big hit on the ColecoVision. It also got cloned on other on all the 8 bits and whatnot. It has its audience. I believe, did we play Ladybug on this
Mhm.
show? I think we did.
Yep. I
So-
like Ladybug. I think it's a good game. I think it's a real good game.
And then they moved on in '82 to what would be their biggest hit series of games. And in '82, they released Mr. Do. Mr. Do was hugely popular and was their biggest selling game, probably. I'm sure it's their biggest selling game in the U.S. Mr. Do you saw everywhere. And it spawned several sequels, which included Mr. Do's Castle, which is one of my favorites. Mr. Do's Wild Ride, which, as far as I know, is nobody's favorite. And Do Run Run, which is one of Boat's favorites. So those, when you say Universal, the Do games come to mind. Do you have a preference on which one of those you like the most?
Mr. Do, the original.
Mhm.
This really is another way of saying, look what you can do when you franchise a mascot.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't the first mascot by any stretch of the imagination, but Universal had been doing. They did a long segment of Cosmic games,
Yeah.
but really that was just in name only. There was nothing that necessarily tied them together. This was their first mascot that they did anything with from game to game.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped his popularity.
Yeah, I agree. And so, excuse me. So here's something a lot of people don't know. So in the early '80s, what was the big driver in a lot of areas? It was Laserdisc.
Yeah.
And Universal decided to jump into Laserdisc full bore. Okay, which I didn't notice till I read this. They developed a Laserdisc game system called the Universal System 1. This I'd never heard. Okay, because the one game I knew about that was released on the Laser One system, the System 1, was Super Don Quixote. Now
Yes.
we never saw this ever in the arcade.
No. Mm-mm.
But when the Daphne emulator came out, and even before that, I'd read about it on a Dragon's Lair website. Super Don Quixote is a pretty. I mean,
It's a good, yeah.
if you look at the Laser family, there's nothing wrong with it. It's what you would expect from a Laserdisc game. They even had a couple car games that were Laserdisc games, but their plan was to release a new laser game every 6 months.
Impossible.
Well, they were going to do it because they had the system that could do it. They thought, okay, we've got a system in play that can do it. So they never released another one. But get this, in an ironic twist, they were working on an unreleased laser game that was about Mr. Do. So there was a Mr. Do Laserdisc game.
And
I've got no idea I've never seen footage of it. I looked around, I couldn't find anything. I would love to have
the
seen that.
expense in that had to have been off the charts. I mean, because now you're doing your own animation.
Yeah.
It's a whole different studio. Oh,
Yeah.
I'd love to see it. I think it could be a lot of fun, but
And
holy moly.
the funny thing is, Super Don Quixote was near the end of their releases in the arcade.
Yes.
They had an unreleased game that never came out. That they worked on after that, but they didn't do much after Super Don Quixote. And I guess I don't know exactly why they stopped, but ultimately they ended up becoming. They moved into the pachinko and slot area, and they were in America. They were putting stuff out. They worked on casino machine games in Nevada, Mississippi, and New Jersey. So at the time, those were really the only places that were really doing gambling. So there was Atlantic
in the
City, Las
States.
Vegas. Did you ever play any of their offerings in them?
No, and I was kind of surprised they Konami before Konami did.
Yeah.
Because that's another one that slotted everything up and pachinkoed it. Although I don't think they really pulled their properties into their gambling stuff, did they, or do you know? Was there a Mr. Do pachinko machine out there?
I didn't look too deeply into it, but there's none. It's if you think about it, that wouldn't be the worst idea. You
Well,
know,
no, except you're killing your legacy.
well, I mean, they also like money. If you've got all this, if you've got the width and breadth of the universal game library, what are you going to pull out of it to use in a pachinko or slot machine? Your only choices are probably going to be Mr. Do or maybe Ladybug. I'd say that's about it, wouldn't you?
In Ladybug, you'd have to use the hot cabinet art, and no one would know what it was.
And the hot cabinet art's hot, so I do like that. Did you find anything on that?
Just a quick glance
Yeah.
does not seem to show anything where they're like, "Hey, Mr. Do and a slot machine."
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, at the end of the day, they had a long list of games, and one thing I want to mention about some of these, and we're not going to go over all the games, but they did have some games that I thought were quite good. And one of them I want to mention was a game I used to play back in the day called Cosmic Avenger, which was a cool space game, and it had awesome cabinet art on it as well. And one thing a lot of their games had really good cabinet art.
Excellent cabinet.
Which is funny because a lot of them had crappy cabinet art. It's funny. They really were all over the map and that. But that one, I was on there's a Universal fandom Facebook page, and all the guys on there have all these really awesome looking cabinets that they put together. Some of them they've augmented with better art, but I mean they're absolutely gorgeous. If you get a chance to go on there. But I definitely wanted to mention that one. That game was I was a big fan of Cosmic Avenger back in the day. They had another game I had played called Kick Rider. Then they had a few soccer games,
real good.
and then they had a game I think we may have played at some point. I'm not sure. I'll take that back. I don't know if we ever played this one or not. It's another soccer game. It sounds familiar to me. It's called American Soccer. It seems like we played that one. Maybe not.
Nothing I recall.
So anyway, we had a comfortable amount of games to look through, to pick a couple winners here. And I don't know how you approach this, but I thought to myself, because we haven't played all the Do games. In fact, I looked. I don't think we've played any Do games on this show. Not
Really?
even Mr. Do. Yeah. And so, but everyone sort of knows those games.
Right.
And I thought I'm going to challenge myself this week to go into their catalog and find something that I'm not familiar with. I don't know how did you approach it?
Well, I definitely said I'm not going to do a Mr. Do game.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to find a game with some amount of interesting trivia or controversy.
Yeah.
And I found it incredibly quickly.
Do you want to go ahead and start the dance then, Brent?
I will start the dance.
All right, get in there. Dance, sucker.
I went with their first original idea, Space Panic.
Yeah.
Now, Aaron, Space Panic, obviously by Universal, in the lovely year of 1980. Did you know, Aaron, that this is credited as being the first platformer?
Yes, I have heard that because it has ladders and platforms in it.
In fact, they weren't going to call the genre a platform game. They were going to call it a ladder game.
Yeah.
But I guess cooler heads prevailed because that's stupid.
That is stupid.
This is also credited as the first digging game, which is not really true. There is a game that was only released in Japan. It's Alien, blah, blah, blah. It's Alien and then some Japanese word I can never hope to pronounce.
Japanese for digging.
But yes, but the difference in that is it's a top-down perspective, and when you dig, it draws a circle where you've obviously dug a hole, but you're not really manipulating your environment. I mean, you are, but...
So you're not really digging.
Well, I mean, you are. You're opening a hole, and you want things to fall into it so you can cover it back up. But I feel like when you did it in Space Panic, you were actually changing the platforms where you could fall into them or you could cover them back up. And changing your environment in a video game outside of things like shooting the protective domes and like Space Invaders, there's not a whole lot of games that have you doing things like that where the player manipulates the environment that he's actively taking part in.
Sure.
So first digging game, no. First platform game, yes. And really all that means is there was multiple platforms that your player could go on. For those that don't know and are not watching at home, Space Panic has you on a multi-platform, single-stage, static screen in the vertical orientation, where you have 7 platforms with ladders randomly spaced around the board that you can climb up and down. And your objective is to dig holes and trap aliens inside the holes that you dig. And once they fall in the hole, you have to then go back over and whack them with your shovel until you shove them through the hole so that they fall on the platform below, die, and you get your
You
points.
sort of pummel them with the shovel.
You absolutely do.
It's like you don't just whack them once.
No.
You have to beat them
You-
down
you-
into the dirt.
Yes.
You hate aliens in this game. You hate them.
The way that you are uh, ramping up in difficulty is in the first few stages, you only have to drop the aliens down one flight, one level for them to die. In later levels, some aliens have to go through 2 platforms, and some have to go through 3 platforms.
Yeah, those are the levels you'll never reach. I want to mention that.
And this is really, I'm going to throw some of my cards on the table here.
Yeah, get them in there.
I like Space Panic for about 2 plays, and then I never want to touch it for years.
It makes you angry.
It makes you incredibly angry. The game is very, very difficult. If you are watching home, I just realized the guy that we're watching is cheating.
Yeah,
He's got
I
on
noticed that.
a no touchy die.
It's not that easy in real life.
The amount of aliens that are on the screen at one time is tremendous.
Yeah.
There are tons of them. And just because an alien falls in a hole that you've dug, that doesn't mean he's going to stay in there forever. About 15 seconds later, he'll actually climb out of the hole,
they sort
fill
of
it back in, and then come get you again.
They sort of level up the hole. Like
Yes.
they're basically somehow depositing dirt. I just assume they're using a little tentacles to go like,
Yeah,
and put the dirt in back in.
Although when we say dirt, the platforms are made out of bricks, so
That was a weird design choice.
it's a very strong shovel. That's all we
In
can
fact,
say.
the only thing in this game that looks like it can be dug in is the bottom where you can't
Which
dig.
You can't dig in. That's right. Space Panic was a huge hit for Universal in Japan.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh, we got one here." I mean, it was like top 3 in the 1980s in Japan. So they thought, "Man, get this over to America right now. It's time to really rake in the big money."
Yeah.
And they were like, "Here, America, Space Panic." And America flipped them the bird, dropped their pants, mooned them, and then clucked like a chicken for a while.
Wow.
It was
jerks.
It was a colossal failure in the States. And remember, Aaron, how Space Panic or not Universal stole a lot of their first ideas.
Yeah.
Kind of cherry picked. Well, we're going to do this breakout clone. We're
Yeah.
going to do the Space Play. Well, the shoe was put on the other foot when Apple released Apple Panic, a straight up, basically 1-to-1 remake outside of the aliens looking different, and it killed. It was so high in the selling charts that not only was it the best for 1 year, but it stayed in the top 10 for 3 years running.
Yeah.
Apple Panic, for whatever reason, or probably because, so few games on the Apple, but Apple Panic was a tremendous hit when Space Panic was universally panned here in America. I always thought that was very odd.
It's funny because I did see this in the arcade back in the day, believe it or not.
Mhm.
Yes, I was around in 1980 in the arcade. And I did play it once. I don't know if I ever played it again because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But there was the place I played it the most was on the Coco. Because the Coco had, I think it was called Color Panic. And it was a real good clone. They did a real good job on it, as I recall. It's been a while since I played it. We should put that on the list.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that I guess when this is a kind of a complicated situation, gameplay-wise, to tackle in the arcade. Because, sure, they can tell you what you need to do, but actually doing the task, digging the hole, the enemy falling in, then you have to fill it back up. That's a lot of steps if you don't already know going in what you need to do.
Plus, you could get instantly killed.
Well, yes.
And something else.
There was a timer.
I can see, because your oxygen levels. I can see why this was a big hit in Japan. Because we know from our past experiences that Load Runner was a huge hit in Japan.
Yep.
They loved it. And this is in the same ilk or vice versa. Lode Runner's in the same ilk as this, the same ballpark. And so I can see this is like the thinking man's action game. But in America, we don't like to think. We just want the action.
Well, and this is said to have inspired Lode Runner.
No kidding.
And yeah, Lode Runner, obviously, huge game when it came out.
Yeah.
But this game, I think, was too complex for the time and way too hard for the American audience. Like we said, not only do you have to trap aliens, and when the game starts, there are, 7 aliens that you have to tend with. You also have, your digging animation is four digs to actually make a hole, which takes 3 or 4 seconds before it actually completes a hole, which is very difficult. It's hard to time that. Then you have to dig it back in, and you've got a timer that's continuously counting down that they call as your oxygen, and you can't refill it. There's no getting more oxygen. It's just this is how long you have to complete the level. Tremendously difficult game.
Yeah.
Now, Aaron, you said you played this some in the arcade.
Yeah.
Did you
Well,
like it?
once at least. Well, in the arcade, no. I don't remember. I can't sit here and tell you my exact thoughts, but I know what young A was. And my goal in the old days was to take the 2 or 3 measly quarters that mom would give me in the store or wherever and make them last as long as
Yes.
possible. And that meant games like Space Panic did not get multiple plays
Yes.
because it was too hard. But I did play Color Panic, which is the exact same game on a
Yes.
Coco. So I'm pretty intimate with the game. This is a funny game because and it's one of those games where you can think you may have an idea of what you're doing and just go out there and get slaughtered. But you can get into a nice rhythm in this game once you figure out how I could. I played this a lot this week on the computer because it's a simple game, and you can run through about 1,000,000 games in like 10 minutes. You go over and over and over. So
Yeah.
I ran up through a bunch of games this week, and I will say I did better at this game than I've ever done because you've got one button for shovel, one button for pound down with the shovel. And so what I would on the early levels, for me, the easiest thing to do was to go and camp out in the spot. Now this doesn't work on the later levels, but these aliens are morons.
They are
And
pretty dumb.
eventually they'll stagger into your holes, and you put a hole on each side of you. And when they come in, that's when the beating begins. Whack, you whack them down, and you just keep doing that over and over until they're all dead. You can get away with that on the first 2 levels.
2 levels, yeah.
Then you get to the 3rd level, they're not buying what you saw. Sometimes they just won't show up either.
Yeah.
And that's where they cunningly put in the oxygen supply because otherwise you could just put holes around you and just never leave and just the game would go on forever.
Yes.
So they've got to put in a time limit, and it does come into play more in the later levels.
Absolutely.
I think the farthest I got this week was 2, 3, 4. 4. Yeah, 4. So yeah, well, good. I don't feel as dumb if that's where you got. But I mean, the thing is, when I had just gotten back into it, I just started back. Right away, I was getting insta killed left and right because I didn't get the rhythm. And in a lot of games that have ladders, there's an element where you have to learn how they want you to climb the ladders.
Yes, how to get on.
This is the same thing. How do you get up there? Where can I dig a hole? Because you can't dig one right on top of the ladder. And you can't pound the sucker down right on top of the ladder. You got to give yourself some space.
Yeah.
And it also depends on where they put the ladders in the level. Where you're going to make your stand. Where am I going to do this stuff? What happens and as you go on through the game, more aliens come out. And so if there's 2 aliens coming at you and you've got one hole, one alien goes in the hole and the other one just keeps on trucking.
Well,
You're bummed.
It waits for you. As
Yeah.
soon as you fill that hole, it just runs across and eats you.
So you've got to be careful with your strategy. So it's funny. I enjoyed this week probably more than I've ever enjoyed the arcade version. The Coco version I used to play, I enjoyed it okay. I mean, this isn't my favorite game because by the time this game came out, it had sort of been spoiled by games like Donkey Kong. They had a jumping element to them, where this game has no jumping, no shooting, none of that stuff. That's what makes it hard. It's sort of a foreign game to us because all you've got is the shovel. I'm just saying, it's one thing if you're in 1980 and you've never played a platformer.
I understand, yeah.
But when you've played Donkey Kong and games like that, and all of a sudden you're going backwards, it's a weird feeling. Where's my gun? Why can't I jump?
Yeah, because you dig a hole and then you can fall through your own hole.
Yeah.
But that doesn't work as well as you think it would.
Are you a Load Runner guy?
No.
See, I'm not the biggest fan of Load Runner. Do you like this more or less than Load Runner?
A Space Panic?
Yeah.
Way less.
Yeah, so you like
I mean,
Load Runner more, and you hate you hate Load Runner.
Load Runner is almost a puzzle game.
Well, yeah.
It's an action puzzle. This is action flat.
To me, I enjoy this more than Load Runner because I don't like to have to think as much as I have to think in Load Runner.
No, and it's not really Space Panic's fault. I think the first 3 levels of this game are fun.
Yeah.
But as soon as you have to start dropping them through multiple holes, that loses the fun.
Well, it's too hard. That is real tough.
Yeah.
Because the timing on that and a little luck has to be involved.
Yeah.
You know?
And I don't blame the game because I think that's a very interesting concept. And there's ways to get around it, right? You can trap a smaller alien and drop him onto one that you would have to go through multiple holes, and that will kill both of them.
Right. How many times did you pull that off?
Well, I'm not saying it's something you can do on the regular. But the other problem I have with this is lining up the holes can sometimes be difficult. I mean, there are segments where you can dig a hole. Like if you dig a hole and you're a little bit to the left or to the right, it's actually going to snap you in place. But the variations of places you can dig are a lot more than you think. So you can dig a hole in one level and go down and try to dig it in the exact same spot, be it a half a click off, and then you're screwed. Because the aliens give you no time to breathe in this.
Yeah.
They are on you in an instant, and if you don't have a plan right from the beginning, you're going to die.
It's sometimes they feel like they're just idiots, and sometimes they come at you like they're programmed to kill. It's like the ghost of Pac-Man.
Yeah, I think some of them are designed to stay away, and some of them are just come at you continuously.
But I mean, just to finish my thoughts on it, this isn't a game you're going to sit around. I mean, it might be a game you could really binge, but it's probably not. But it's definitely one you should probably have a go at because if you consider when it was made and what came after it, what came before it, it's an important game, and it's not like it's a game that's just an unplayable mess. It's okay. It's an okay game.
I agree. From a historic standpoint, it's something you should play.
Yeah.
However, do I think that platform and ladder games would have never existed if Space Panic didn't exist? No. It was a foregone conclusion. Games like this were going to happen.
Yeah.
It just happened to make it to market first.
But I think I think there's fun to be had. I don't think it's like you're gonna play. Come on, it's pretty fun. It's not bad. Once you get into the groove, you played to level 4. That's pretty good.
I accept that you can have fun with this, but
that's all I ask.
If you overstay your welcome, you are going to hate it.
I will not fight you on that.
I did not try to find pricing on this, considering it was an arcade game, and those things are very wildly.
They're idiotically priced. Even this one's priced at too expensive.
But the Apple Panic, also the Coleco version of this, they're all readily available.
And I own the Coleco version of this. It's quite good. This is an easy game to port too.
Oh, absolutely. Because say your system can't handle 7 layers, you do 5 layers or 4 layers. You know, at 4 levels, you're fine.
Yeah, I agree. I was pleasantly surprised that we actually got a Discord review on this.
Oh, did we now?
Of course, guess who it's from?
I'm going to have to say it's from Mr. Pajaco.
Correctamundo. Pajaco chimes in. Space Panic, a better name for this game, could not have been created except maybe Get on the Bleeping Ladder. But it isn't nearly as catchy. I knew this game was Monsters. Yes, it's a very popular and famous game of the BBC Micro Monsters for many years. And I only happened to stumble across Space Panic while perusing my backups and MAME ROMs to check that they were still working, wink. I never saw this game in the arcade growing up. He's probably too young for that. Now being an early arcade game, there isn't much to say about this other than it's a tough old game. And for me, the only strategy is to get the level finished as quickly as possible, as the rest of the game is, as the title says, panic-inducing.
Yes.
Even though this is 1980, it has some fun touches like your guy running slow and being red-faced when you're running low on oxygen, and tougher aliens just laughing at you if you don't dig holes in time to kill them. this predates Donkey Kong by a little bit, several years actually. And there were excuse me, this predates Donkey Kong by a little bit, and there are, as someone online pointed out, the roots of Lode Runner in Space Panic. So while it isn't a game, it isn't up there as an arcade legend, it's still a fun game in its own right, and maybe it'll inspire other games. Not one of my favorites. I still prefer Monsters on the Beeb, but I would certainly stick a credit or two if I found one of these in the arcade. 7 out of 10. I think I've tried Monsters on the Beeb. I remember hearing a lot about it when we were doing some Beeb stuff back in the day. So I know that was a pretty popular title in there.
I would say if it's basically this. I mean, a lot of games had a lot of systems had a basically this.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, like I said, it's an easy game. It's an easy game to do, but I think it's an okay game. A basic but difficult game, but kind of fun.
definitely difficult. All right, Aaron, that's what I brought from the Universal Library. What did you have in store?
You know, I looked at actually, by the way, Space Panic was something I thought about early because it is a pivotal title, I think. But I wanted to try something different. And so I looked around to see what on the list. It's funny looking over the Universal list. I'm not rag on Universal, but I wasn't overly impressed with a lot of their titles, aside from the ones I knew. And I thought about a couple, but I saw one, and the name hit me. I'm like, "What is this?" And it was a game called Mrs. Dynamite. Dynamite! And this was a game that was never released. Okay, so this is an unreleased ROM that does exist. The programmer on this isn't listed, but I would guess a lot of the early Universal games are done by a guy named Toshi Ueda. And amongst the games he did was, guess what? Ladybug, Mr. Do, the Bonk series. So this guy had a lot of jack.
Sure.
He did a lot of the early games. He may have been the guy that did Lode Runner, or not Lode Runner, but Space Panic. This was scheduled to be released in '82, and this is a funny bird right here. Because when I got looked into this and got a little bit deeper into it, it really had a lot of interesting things to say. So, again, this was an unreleased game, and up until a few years ago, the only thing we knew about this game was there was a flyer for it, which we'll get back to the arcade flyer for it.
Okay.
But it was literally dumped like just in the past 5 years.
Yes,
5 or 6 years.
It's been recently found.
So I was nosing around on the Universal Arcade fans. I want to give these guys full credit on the Universal Arcade fans Facebook page, and I came across a post on there. And so this fella writes, he says, "So, Mrs. Dynamite." This is Patrick Samuel, by the way, to credit this fella. I'm going to read this verbatim. He said, "In 2017, I thought we would never find Miss Dynamite, and all we had were the flyers as evidence of its existence. Even the president of Universal denied its existence. It was surely vaporware. So I learned how to program on an 8-bit computer and spent 4 months writing my own Mrs. Dynamite." So this guy wrote his own game sight unseen for a computer. All right. Anyway, this year, as of the writing of this, Marco Kirstens was able to buy a board that they'd found in a cocktail machine in Canada. Okay? So they found this game in a cocktail cabinet in Canada. That's all I know about that. They were able to safely dump the ROMs and get it included in the MAME set. So it actually almost 40 years later, they were able to get this thing out there.
Crazy.
The funny thing is, he says his homemade version was actually pretty close to this. He also says the board is a 2-board stack like Ladybug. We've had plenty of games that were 2-board stacks. And he even gives the number for this game. So you had a game that no one knew that if it existed or not. It is it's a maze. It's a sort of a labyrinthine maze game with a twist. It's one player with 2-player hot seat. It's got one button and one 4-way joystick. Okay, it's all you need in this one. Now I want to talk about the arcade flyer.
And it is a vert.
It is a vertical. Thank you. So if you look at the arcade flyer on this, and it's out there, on the front it just says Miss Dynamite, and it's got a thing. And then on the back it says Miss Dynamite fights alone. Okay, that's her catchphrase. And it's got a picture of the game board, and the picture of the game board does not match the ROMs. All right, for example, And this is why I have a feeling that this game was written by the same fellow that did Mr. Do. Okay, in the flyer game screen, there are cherries all over the place. All right. There are also there are, instead of barrels which appear in the game, there are rocks. So you've got entirely different elements that don't appear in the game. Okay, um, and the scoring is different, and also the characters don't look quite the same. Okay, so you've got some different stuff going on with the game. So that with those, I mean, given the fact it's a maze game, it's got cherries, it's got a cut scene, much just like Mr. Do does. This game, I would wager that Kayatashi Ueda did this one as well. That's just my guess. And who will never, maybe we'll never find out. So let's talk about the game proper. Again, as Brent mentioned, this is a vertical game where you play the titular Mrs. Dynamite, not Miss Dynamite. This chick's married.
Yeah.
I guess Mr. Dynamite was to be appear later, but though it does say Mrs. Dynamite fights alone, so maybe she's a widower. But I guess when you're Dynamite family, that probably happens a lot. So Mrs. Dynamite is a character who this game starts in a maze, and when the game starts, at the top there's like a little roll call of bad guys. They blink, and then as they blink, they disappear and then appear on the game maze. You know, so that way you know how many guys you're fighting. Um, Mrs. Dynamite's a character who runs around a maze. And in the maze, you have a few different things. You've got monsters, obviously. You've also got barrels. uh, and you've also got sticks of dynamite. Okay. You have to grab sticks of dynamite. When you grab them, your dynamite inventory appears at the top of the screen. And then you can run around the maze and you can use your button to drop a stick of dynamite. And the goal of the game is to blow up all the bad guys with dynamite.
And not throw, drop, as
Right.
in right where you're standing.
The old drop and run. Okay. And so you can get multiple stacks of dynamite. I think you can have a total of 6. And Mrs. Dynamite runs around, she'll drop a stick of dynamite, and you got to run away, because if you don't, it'll blow up. And you don't get this isn't like you don't get a Bomberman like amount of time to run. This is the dynamite goes off quick.
She's lighting it with a quick fuse.
Right. And so when you kill a guy, that's great. But what you want to do is kill multiple guys. That's even better. And I believe it's if you kill 3 guys at once, you'll get it's just not easy to do, but you can get extra man doing that. Now, I mentioned there are barrels in this. In the flyer, they're more rock-like, but it's hard to make out. They could just be the side because the barrels have a different look to the side than they do to the front.
It's definitely barrels.
Right, because they roll like barrels, but in the flyer, they look more like rocks. The barrels in this, there is speculation that the barrel section of this game isn't quite done. And the reason that's speculated is when the bad guy, well, I mean, it could be done. That's just the way they wanted it.
Yeah.
And when the bad guys can get behind these barrels and they roll out a barrel, but it's not a barrel of fun, it's a barrel of pain. Because they'll roll these barrels all over the place, all around corners, everything, and they'll roll them at you. And if you get hit by a barrel, you're done. All right, you're dead. You can nudge barrels when you have to go up to them and sort of hit them a couple times, and they'll go, but it doesn't kill the bad guy. And you would think they would make that an element of the game. Don't you think so? Is that why?
No.
Why? Do you have a reason why you think that?
I think that the barrels are there as a weapon for the bad guys.
Well, it worked, but do they need more? There's so many of them. So this game is a frantic race around this maze. The barrels and the thing is, the way the mazes are set up is there are many places where you can roll barrels all the way across the screen. So they can just launch barrels at you from across the screen from a guy you didn't even see that could hit you. Once you have wiped out all the monsters, the round win. Now, if you've got one monster left, and this is sort of like sort of like Dig Dug, he'll try to leave. He'll leave. Now, if you are, and you can use up all your dynamite. So at certain points, you're going to be on the screen, and you're out of dynamite, and there's a guy left. Well, that's when a countdown starts for the super dynamite. If the super dynamite is in play, and it'll say at the top of the screen, super dynamite. That dynamite has a bigger kill radius than regular dynamite. And then hopefully you can use that to kill the bad guy. And otherwise, he just leaves and the round ends. After you run through about 3 of these rounds, you get a wacky Mrs. Dynamite cutscene.
Every 5.
Is it 5? And so when this happens, it tells you how good I am at this game. Everyone, when that happens, there's some monsters in the tree. She goes rolling in with dynamite and blows some of them up. That's one of the things I saw.
Well, it's the only thing.
Yeah, I didn't know if it ever changed. But the cutscenes are very Mr. Do-like. If you'll recall, when you get a diamond or an extra man of Mr. Do, although those are better, don't get me wrong. These cutscenes, I don't know if I'd take the stick of dynamite and just toss it up in the air. That's like a bad idea. But that's the one that...
From the cutscene, it almost looks like it backfires on Mrs. Dynamite.
Yeah, it does, because it doesn't look like the dynamite explodes, but a monster falls out of the tree. This game is... I would say this game's every bit as difficult as Space Panic. In fact, I got further in Space Panic than I did this game. This is one tough game. And every round where the new round starts up and they start counting down those monsters, there's more and more. And the monsters they don't just come at you, but they're devious.
Yeah.
They will take these barrels all through that maze. It's amazing to me that if this is the way they meant the game to be, that they wouldn't give you the same access to the barrels as the bad guys.
The bad guys don't get to throw dynamite.
Well, they should pick it up, because you have to pick it up. I mean, the bad guys outnumber you like 6, 7, 8, 10 to 1. If you play 2 players, it's just a hot seat endeavor. You're second player, nothing special there. And it just rolls on. I read that this game just eventually it never ends. You just keep playing it forever. I think it just flips over, but the score does. It's a difficult game, but I'd never heard of it or seen it. And the fact that it's an unreleased game made me wonder, why was this unreleased? Assuming that it's a finished game, and it was in a ROM set, and someone in Canada had it in a cocktail machine.
Mm-hmm.
God knows where it came from. Like, why would you not release this as a game? And the only answer I could come up with was they didn't think it would be a hit or make any money. And now, having played a lot of the Universal games, I think there's potential in this game. I like the character. I like the idea that it's a girl character. This predates Bomberman by a good while. So the concept was fresh of using explosives to kill bad guy. It's a fresh concept that had not been plucked. So what do you think? Would this have made a decent release, or did they do the right thing?
Well, I think that it was sent to test locations and then did not test well, and that's why they didn't sell it. I'm going to blow your mind a little bit, Aaron.
Get into it.
Do you think, because you compared this to Bomberman,
right? Well, I mean, there's a natural comparison. A maze game where you drop explosives on band monsters.
You noted this was by the Ladybug guy. You know what this game reminds me of?
What?
Pingo.
Well, there's a little Pingo in there too, except if the bad guys could throw the ice and you couldn't, they'd be like Pingo.
Well, here's the thing, because I think you kind of misdescribed some of the things that are going on here.
All right.
If a monster is pushing a barrel, he has to actually shove the barrel to kill you with it. If the barrel is just sitting on the stage, you can actually roll the barrel around.
Yes.
And the barrel will automatically take corners. If you come up to a junction, that would just be dead end. So you can actually take their weapons and roll them like all in one corner.
Yeah.
That was my number one strategy.
That was the common strategy that I read about, so you could get the big groups. Yeah.
Thing number 2 that you didn't mention.
I did mention that, by the way.
No, you didn't.
I did.
If you don't do anything for long enough, if the stage goes on for long enough, the monsters will congregate in the center of the screen.
Really?
Yes.
I don't think I ever had that happen.
And they will, like, say you've got 6 monsters, right?
Yeah.
They'll go 1, 2, 3, and then have a blank area, and then 1, 2, 3. Think of it like a grid.
Okay.
So say monsters 1, 2, and 6 get there early. They will just stand in place and just kind of jog.
Okay.
While the other monsters get there until it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they're all there.
Yeah.
And that's when you strike. That is when you pound them get that extra man.
Really?
I never killed a group that I did not get an extra man unless I was just cleaning up the last one or two.
So what were you? So your strategy was just to roll around the maze and leave all those guys alive. How did you survive
Yes.
that long?
I took all the barrels and I
Yeah.
rolled them to the corners. I made an effort to get the barrels out of the way as much as possible, and then I just sat. That they will eventually find you. They will eventually come to where you're at. But if you just don't move, they will try to go and get the barrels, which takes a little bit of time. And then if you've got all the barrels clumped up, when they shove the barrels will collide into each other, and then they have to get the barrel that they send up screen. So that and all that time, the internal timer is counting.
Yeah.
And as soon as the internal timer gets to where they need to all congregate, they stop what they're doing and they all congregate.
How did you come up with this plan?
And here's the thing. If you let them wait long enough,
Yeah.
so they come to the center, they've got the 6, right? The next place they congregate is at the bottom of the screen. But this time they don't do a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across the bottom.
Yeah.
Not as useful. Now, so I tried to always
Because you can only get 2 at a time.
right. Well, when they come out of that, though, they usually will try to come to you.
Yeah.
So if you're up a little bit, they'll come up, run through the maze. And if the maze is shaped properly, you can get 2 or 3 or 4 to come your direction and get them that way.
No kidding.
Another thing, when you lay down a bomb or dynamite, it blows up the square that it's in
Yeah.
and 1 square away.
Right.
Now, if there's walls there, it won't go through them. So it will only. So if you do it in a corridor where there's only up and down, only the up and down flames go off. That's very important because you want to try to get 4-way explosions every time you put down a piece of dynamite. When you can fill up on dynamite. When you pick up your first dynamite, you get 3 sticks. Then you get another 3 sticks, and then if you pick up more, you just get bonus points.
Right.
So I would go around and get as many bonus points as I could. And then, bam, extra. And when you get an extra man, so you blow up 3 at one time, it doesn't just play a little tune and give you a man down at the bottom.
Right.
A man spawns, or a woman, spawns from the explosion, walks through the maze down to where your life counter is at the bottom of the screen, and then just phases through the wall and becomes an extra.
That is an interesting touch there.
I loved this game.
Really?
Holy cow! I love this game.
You back up for a minute? The barrel strategy. How did you come up with that? Because I love one of those barrels like the plague. Because when Mrs. Dynamite runs into them,
there's a
she can't just whack them. No. You have to kind of push up against them for a while before they move. And so they scared me. They were shooting those things everywhere. How did you come up with the idea of moving them onto one X?
When I first started playing, I thought, man, this is very Pingo feeling. I'm going to roll these barrels into them. And it didn't work. But I could move the barrels. And then I saw how they were using the barrels as a projectile. And it's really cool because they roll them at 1 speed. And when they shoot them as a projectile, it's a completely different speed. It's faster.
Yeah.
So it has a visual
That's because they're doing corners and stuff with them.
And it's really visually pleasing for me. Also, when the stage starts and there's a lot of monsters, you run faster than the monsters. When there's only 1 left, the monster runs faster than you. I guess it's so you can try to get away. So since you're faster than them, it's all about clumping. This game reminds me of Pingo and Miss Pac-Man because you want to clump all those guys together just like you wanted to clump the ghost together before you get the energy pellet and get all those massive points.
Yeah, that's a great plan. I never thought about that.
And when you get an extra man, every single time you kill 3 or more, every single time you can get a lot of men. You are women. I'm sorry, you can get a lot of women.
So, how far into this did you get with that strategy?
I think the farthest I ever got was stage 9.
Oh wow, way farther than me. I had trouble getting the first cutscene.
But I had a lot of times when I would get up to 5 or 6 women, extra lives, and then blow them all, and it failed just traumatic, just over and over and over and over and over.
Oh yeah.
and the game can eat you up real quick if you aren't paying attention.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, this is a fast-paced game. I think the enemies having the weapons, having the barrels as weapons, is so clever. I think that is so fun. I think it's absolutely on purpose. I don't think that it was supposed to be coded a different way. I think that's the way it was meant to be. But I also think that's why this failed on test locations,
Yeah.
because this would have came out in 1982,
Yeah.
which is the same year Pingo came out. So if you played this and then you played Pingo or vice versa,
Yeah.
you'd be incredibly confused that you can't use the weapons on the that
I
are
was.
in
I
the
was. I was
stage.
confused about it.
But I love this game. The marquee for this, I wish I was trying to pull up a visual to put on stream,
Yeah.
is beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's you can only tell it by the flyer, but holy cow, it's nice.
Yeah.
I would love.
And the work that they've got behind the screen and the little area. I mean, this is all custom stuff.
Yes,
The guys that have made, because there are plans up there to make this cabinet.
I would love to make this cabinet. I think that would be such a fun project.
I'm surprised someone like yourself who dabbled in MAME on and off for years haven't ever came across this.
Never played.
I guess because
this.
when you were doing that, it wasn't in the list.
This is one of the best games that I've ever played of prototype / unreleased games.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was so I can't speak highly enough.
The funny thing about this, there was a lot of Mr. Do like elements to this. And
No,
what
there weren't.
Sure there were. The monsters looked. I mean, I'm not talking about the
You need
gameplay. I'm talking the
visuals.
visual.
Okay, sure.
And when you got the last couple monsters on the screen, you know what I expected to happen was, remember, and when you play Mr. Do or Mr. Do's Castle, that they would mutate into a deadlier enemy.
Yes.
I could almost see where you're going to put that element in this game and made it work. Now they had their own slant, which is fine. But would you agree with me when I say there's a high probability that the same guy that did the Do's was involved in this one?
What out? Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's at least influence, if absolutely nothing else. Something I would have liked to have seen, and they could have taken this sort of out of Ladybug or really Mr. Do, either way.
Yeah.
I wish you could have blown up the barrels. I wish that you could have blown them up with your dynamite, and inside there could have been a chance of getting a letter. It
would have been nice, because I will say, I thought to myself, wow, you blowing up 3 of these guys, get you an extra man. That seems like a recipe for disaster, because I mean, someone's going to figure something out. And of course, you did.
Well, it's a high risk, high reward situation.
Yeah. If this is a game that sounds interesting to you, like I said, the ROMs do exist, and you can get them. If you're interested in looking at some of the arcade machines that were made, or getting information to make your own arcade machine, there was a guy doing limited runs of the Marquee, and you could probably still get one. Again, I suggest you go over to the Universal Arcade Fans Facebook page. They had a lot of very intelligent guys there that know everything about Universal. We did get, one review of this from Jocko. He writes, and I didn't read this, but I'd wager he had problems with it because I thought it was hard too. While we can argue, and I will, that piracy is preservation, this is one of those cases where you can say 100% that without piracy, this game would have just been lost to time, because until a couple of years back, it was. This is a fun and interesting maze game, but by 1982, there were a plethora of them, including Universal's own Ladybug. And I can see that possibly Mrs. Dynamite was an evolution of Ladybug. I can even see some elements of Pingo in there.
Yeah,
but I don't think either one borrowed from the other, though. The game itself is pretty straightforward. Blow up baddies to get to the next level. You can get a handle on this game, and it feels a little disconnected in places, like it wasn't quite finished. For example, you can push the barrels, they pass right over the enemies, but the enemies can push the barrels and kill you. That's exactly what I said. However, this has some really fun mechanics, including getting extra life for blowing up 3 monsters at once. So there is a herding strategy to be learned. And then there's a super bomb when you run out of dynamite, and the last baddie can just run away, which is quite amusing. I managed to get to the slightly odd cutscene showing the monsters apparently getting their own back on Mrs. Dynamite. So maybe she isn't the hero of the story. It's a valid point. This is a little rough around the edges, but give it a blast, and you might be blown away by it. Dynamite, 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10 on that one from Pajaco, and I
So-
would agree with that.
Something I want to throw in real quick
Yeah.
from the original flyer. It says, when there is a rock in the labyrinth, which turned out to be barrels,
Yeah,
Mrs. Dynamite cannot pass it, which in this game,
she can push
she
it.
can actually push it.
Yeah.
The monsters try to push the rock to clog the labyrinth or crush Mrs. Dynamite.
Right.
So, from the flyer, taking into account they made some changes on the main board, I never think it was intended for you to be able to use the barrels.
I
as a
wish you
weapon.
could use it. That's just me.
Make the game way too easy.
Well, it was hard enough for me. So what did you think about Universal Arcade games overall? Did you enjoy looking through them?
I've always liked Universal.
Yeah.
I always think they put out funny. I've always thought they put out pretty unique things.
Yeah.
I guess not in the beginning after learning a little more about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this Mrs. Dynamite is a tremendous game. I put this, and you're not going to agree, but I put this right up there with like a Mr. Do.
Well, I mean, listen, there's more potential in the game given your strategies that I utilize. So I'll withhold judgment. But I do think as a game that was unreleased, I think it's something that should be released. And I'm glad
Tremendous,
it was
yes.
kicked out. And we appreciate the fellows that brought it down from the Great White North, the Brent. You know, normally, what would we do right here? It's a little thing called spin the wheel.
Oh, get the wheel theme going.
Well, cancel the wheel theme.
Oh, okay, I'll turn it
Because
down.
we're not going to be spinning the wheel. Tell them why, the Brent.
This coming Friday.
Yeah.
At this point,
Give them the date, the Brent.
sure. The date is.
You don't know it, do you? I'll look.
Yes, I do. It is the 29th.
Yeah,
We will be doing the Thanks for Giving Marathon.
that's right.
Will it go 6 hours? Will it go 8 hours? Will it go 10 hours?
It better go 8 hours because I got to do Amigos directly after it. It's got to go 8 hours exactly.
All right. Well, there goes that element of surprise. 8 hours. Aaron and I are going to just play games, and it's not for any kind of charity. It's not for a telethon to give us money. We want money now. This is simply to say thanks to everyone who has given to us, who's watched our stuff, who's shared it with others,
Yeah.
who subscribes to the channels.
Watches the live streams, sends in reviews, sends in wheel piece ideas over to ARG Presents at mail.com. Plug, ARG Presents at mail.com.
Or people who are signed up at the Retro Rotation Patreon.
Yeah.
All this, it's for all this people to just say, we appreciate you, and we want to try to entertain you the day after Thanksgiving here in the U.S. and just some random Friday throughout the rest of the world.
Yeah, myself and the Brent, we host ARG Presents, Art Sinclair, the Coco Show, the Atari ST Show, and I'm also an Amigos, and Brent occasionally gets over there. And so you can expect a little bit of all those things in the marathon, plus a whole lot more. I'm going to crank the mister up in here, and we're going to be at a rocket speed through all sorts of games. There's a lot of gaming possibilities, including some of our old nemesis and some of our old favorites, too. Are we going to play Yeti? Don't know. Are we going to play Shays Maxim? Maybe. Are we going to play
single-player games?
We're going to play Mrs. Dynamite. We're not going to play all double-player games. We're going to play everything. It's going to be a crazy time. We hope you will join us at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Thanks for Giving Marathon. It should be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
And then stick around for the next hour as I'll hop over to the from our show here to do a Amigos with the boat. So I've got to do double duty that night.
Absolutely.
Should be a lot of fun. I want to thank everybody who tuned in last week for ARG Presents. That was a very successful show.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. And I want to also give a shout out to everyone who caught up with me on the Friday Night Disaster stream this week, where it was a 2.5 hour extravaganza of loading things in FreeDOS, loading games in FreeDOS, and then playing those games. We played a great game of Oregon Trail Deluxe that would beat the band. You never seen me get so far in Oregon Trail. I almost made it, but I got killed. So not to ruin that game. But yeah, thanks for everybody that showed up for that. I appreciate, of course, everyone that showed up for Amigos on Friday. We got a lot of stuff cooking throughout the rest of December coming up, including all of our Christmas shows. And at the end of the year, the big extravaganza where we get boat in here and we have a huge, coming together for all of our shows, and we have our end of the year awards. It should be a lot of fun.
All right, Aaron. Say goodbye to the people, and we will see you guys on Friday.
Goodbye.
We got it going. With a spin of the wheel, we'll uncover our fate and stream it to you all in one take.